Time for another bonus episode. Ideally, I'm helping you plan your hunting season. Maybe that big trip of the year, or maybe you live close enough to wherever it is we talk about so that you can go there for the weekend. Other choices include the week, the month, the whole season. Up to you, of course. I'm Scott Linden. Glad you could join me, host of the Upland Nation podcast, and these bonus episodes that, by the way, thanks for all the great feedback. I hope to make these a regular habit every few weeks, and hope they are of interest to you. If they are, please tell a friend. That's how we grow around here, and man, are we growing. Appreciate all your support in that regard. Yeah, if you've got the mega hall pass from your spouse, maybe you could do this entire trip in one 3-4 week process, whatever it takes, but bite this into consumable chunks and see what you can do there. We're going to talk about my favorite place, the Great Basin out in the west. I'll explain more about what the Great Basin is, but the bottom line for you and me is chukars and valley quail. Yeah, if you're interested in either subject, I'm going to give you pretty much a how-to. From where to go to how to hunt, even some towns that you can base yourself in. It's all coming up right here on this special bonus edition of the Upland Nation podcast, brought to you by Sage and Breaker, Pointer Shotguns, Mid-Valley Clays and Shooting School, TrulockChokes Tubes, MidwayUSA.com, Purina Pro Plan Sport, LandTrust.com, ESPAmerica.com, and HiViz Shooting Systems. Hey, quick reminder, if you haven't heard yet, Wing Shooting USA is coming back. Yeah, you probably haven't seen these episodes. They've only aired once, and it was, a couple of years back. If you want to watch the entire season, it starts July 1st on 5 or 6 different TV networks. The easiest way to figure out how to watch it is go to the findbirdhuntingspots.com web page and then click on the Wing Shooting USA tab. I have a list of all the local stations, all the networks, all the streaming, online, smart TV apps, everybody who's carrying it starting July 1st. And the first one is a fun episode, Pheasants in Wyoming. Yeah, I know. It's a head scratcher, but there are some, and we found them, along with all sorts of other interesting things, including a herd of bison who kind of followed us along. If you enjoyed Wing Shooting USA, it's back. Fresh episodes ready to go July 1st. Find birdhuntingspots.com. Click on the Wing Shooting USA tab. Quick update. Great feedback from the last Montana special bonus episode, and some great suggestions from listeners on other places to go. So if you have any thoughts on these, don't forget, you can always talk with me about those on all the social media, one way or another. Here's one, Jordan, Montana, all the way from Brusset Road, all the way to the Charles Russell Wildlife Refuge and Fort Peck Reservoir. Thousands and thousands of public and private walk-in acres there. Huns and sharptails mostly out there. Go down to Zortman. Yeah, I know, it sounds like it's right out of a Simpsons episode. Go to Zortman, Montana for lots of public and private walk-in country. Huns, sharptails, and even sage grouse near Zortman. Those are 2 great suggestions, and the spirit behind them, I appreciate it. Let's spread out the traffic in Montana so nobody gets tired of all of the rest of us coming to Montana instead of staying in our own state. Well, if you're listening to this, you're probably a pretty good, visitor. You do the right things. Maybe that'd be a bonus episode someday as well. I've written that story a couple times just to get it off my chest. Anyway, let's get down to the main topic today. It's one of those that sometimes I apologize in advance if I sound like I'm way too close to this topic. It's because I love the place, and it is a massive place, and I'm not afraid to recommend more people come and take a look at it. Now you got to pack carefully. You got to be in shape. Your dog's got to be in shape. But if you're looking for an adventure in what is often an otherworldly setting, it's the Great Basin. Just roughly speaking, I'll describe it as north of Las Vegas, east of the Sierra Nevada mountains, west of the Rockies, and south of, well, let's just call it northern Idaho. Big basin. Everything that goes, all the water that goes in there goes to die. It does not drain to any ocean. It's a big sump. Anyway, we'll get more onto the geography later. But I was thinking about this a while back and thought, how do you sum up a place like that? Well, maybe the best way is with one of the trips I made with a very young dog and a seasoned dog somewhere in the Great Basin. We were walking up a hill towards a spot that I thought looked pretty good. As I top one ridge on the way over that hill, there's a coyote on the next ridge. He's maybe 100 yards away, and he's looking at us. He's not moving. You can see the wind ruffling his tail, the hair on his tail. And he kind of zeroes in. He looks at the mature dog on my left. He looks at me in the middle. And he looks at my pup on the right. And then it's Katie bar the door. Makes a beeline towards the puppy. I don't have much to do. All I can do is shoot the 2 barrels of Chukar loads I have, number 6 shot at him. The first one rolled him. He got up and kept going. I rolled him with the second one. He limped off. I could never find him to finish him off. Whew. We caught our breath. We went the other way up to the top of that ridge. And the lava up there erodes out of the hills. And sometimes it's a wall. It's like a wall, not really a big clump. And this one looked a lot like a dragon back. The spines, or maybe a stegosaurus. Both dogs tiptoed to the edge, to the end of that dragon back, and hit a point. Chukars got up from all around us. We had literally walked into a big covey. Of course, I missed on the first shot. Both dogs panicked, for lack of a better term. They'd never seen that many birds to that point in their career. I did much the same, but I did end up having time to reload and shot one bird out of that. That's how the day went. On the way down, we found an old stone dugout from a sheep herder's camp, and it was surrounded by valley quail, so the shooting did improve a little bit after that. Bottom line, that's the Great Basin in one half-day hunt. Bitter alongside the sweet and a ragged edge in what is quite often a bubble-wrapped world. It's got its own beauty. A lot of people will stand there next to the truck and say, man, this place is desolate and ugly. I guess it's in the eye of the beholder. But I've been hunting the Great Basin for 30 years, and every sandy plain and rocky crag is still a revelation. There's a lot of adventure out there. There's a lot of geology. Wildest birds in the country, which are often on somebody's bucket list, those chukars. It's incredible. Some of the other things you might find if you make a trip to the Great Basin: pictographs from the native hunters that preceded us. Oh, and all the spacemen that they also put on those rock walls. The Old West, the cattle country heritage, is still alive and well. Most of that country is grazed by some of the bigger cattle operations in the West. One of my favorite places to stop started as a stage station over 100 years ago. There's still a horse tied up once in a while out there too. So it's one of those places that if it is on your bucket list, hopefully something I share with you today will be of value. So if you go beyond the 2-track, hunkered on some of those wind-swept knobs, and mainly the boulder-covered slopes, you're always going uphill or downhill, are chukars. Yeah, it's where they took hold. They were, introduced in many places, but this ugly, desolate, desert-like Great Basin best resembles their native territory over in the Middle East and India. The foothills of the Himalayas, for example. They're just dots, and from a distance you can't tell what they are until they start talking to each other, and you hear that. And even smaller dots are the valley quail that are hanging in the low spots. Never found them very high, not way up where, classic chukar country, but in the folds and the, bends in the landscape, especially if there's water nearby. The brushy stuff, that's what they like the most. And they're always nice, a fun addition to a chukar hunt, because by then you're down at the bottom of the hill and you can walk on relatively level ground. And they cooperate a little bit better for a pointing dog. I've talked before, and I'll talk again, about finding the occasional Hungarian partridge out in those kind of places. I wouldn't count on it. It would be a bonus, and then you won't be disappointed. But in the Great Basin, there's so much going for it. Like I said, the paths of native hunters have been there and still are. There's still tribes out there. There's still a lot of buckaroos out there who trail the cattle and try to make a living among the volcanoes. And then there's still mountain lions. So if you're looking for adventure, and most of us will never do that Himalayan snowcock hunt. If you're looking for an adventure that gets about as close to white knuckle stuff as you're ever going to get as a bird hunter, it's a chukar hunt in the Great Basin. Give you one perfect example. Beautiful day, early in the season. We were side hilling a spot which was more rock than soil. Tom was above me, and I was a little bit behind him. That's kind of how we like to do it. He pushed a bird out. It went up, and then it started going straight down. Maybe it hadn't seen me yet. He called my attention to it with a shot. I looked up, raised the shotgun. As soon as that gun went to my shoulder, both feet came out from under me. Both knees hit both boulders I'd been standing on. And in all the pain, I actually hit the bird. Flick saw it from the very beginning. He knew that was a dead bird. He went all the way down to the bottom. Came all the way back up. I let him hold it for a little while. Quick drink of water. Check both knees and make sure they were still functional. We'd had a great time. Yeah, that's the joy of this place. You never know where the birds are going to be. You never know what they're going to do. We were going up over another ridge many, many, many years ago. We didn't even know that country yet. Now it's one of our go-to spots. And sure enough, another covey gets up, and it kind of jinks right down over that ridge. So we saw them for a moment, and then they went down the other side. About then, a shadow, a massive shadow, comes from behind us. I look up, it's a golden eagle. And if you've never seen one up close, they're like small planes. Their wingspan is like 6 or 7 feet. He swings down over that ridge. We run over to the top of that ridge, limp over to the top of that ridge. And he's down on the bottom of that draw. with both wings. You've seen what they call a stoop, I think, sitting on he's over the dead chukar that would have been my bird. And he's looking at us with an eye that said, don't get any closer. This is all mine. Yeah. Yeah, rivers go here to die. There are sheer lava cliffs on much of this country. But the other interesting thing about it is it's surrounded by big rivers that do go to the ocean. So if you can, that's a good place to start. If you take a map of the western U.S., you can find a river on the east side of Oregon's border with Idaho. Good spot. One on the west side of Nevada's border with Oregon. One on the north side of Oregon's border with Washington. Another one that goes down heading south on the eastern border of Washington and Idaho. These are all great places to think about a chukar hunt in the Great Basin. They're massive, massive rivers, and because of them, the topography has been carved, formed, and figured into great chukar country. The Owyhee, the Snake River, two of the best. So, what are we looking for? What kind of habitat can you find in the Great Basin, and what kind of chukar hunting opportunities as a result? Well, let me start with one perfect example. I was hunting in one state, walked over the road, such as it was, and was in another state on a cheatgrass covered slope. And cheatgrass is one of the prime considerations. I'll talk more about that later. There was patchy sagebrush, rocks, and little crumpled bits of topology everywhere. Let's see, who was that? That must have been Manny, my last wire hair before Flick. He was on point on a gully that I didn't even see. It was so narrow and deep. By the time I got to it and saw him in it, the Huns got up. They shot straight down that gully, and there was no safe shot for me. The funniest part about that was I didn't think there were Huns there. It was terrible Hun country. But they were still there. And I wouldn't have hit it if I'd shot at one, because I was so, kerfuffled by the size of the bird. Bigger than a quail, smaller than a chukar. What the heck were they? So you do have a chance every once in a while. So load accordingly. I shoot 7.5 for all those birds. Works pretty good, especially if you got a good, high-quality load in your gun. Like I said, we could have jumped valley quail or chukars or even a badger. Lots of badgers in chukar country. We finished going up that slope and found petroglyphs and a wall with a shelf. This was about a 20-foot sheer wall. It ran for about 100 yards along near the top of that ridge. All the eroded soil that had exposed that lava rock wall, basalt wall, had created a shelf that had more chukar poop on it than I've ever seen. Of course, the chukars weren't there. They were down the hill at that time of day. We did chase a few of those later. It was fun. What you look for is kind of those volcanic upthrusts, those kind of big chunks of rock that have created big hills, small mountains, whatever you want to call it. They don't need to be real tall, but the taller the better. They're in that kind of country, especially if there's a boulder-strewn, what they call alluvial fan going down to the level ground. That's all that eroded soil that has come off the rocks and is now basically working its way downhill slowly over centuries. But that's not all. If you're up in that country and you find a bench, a plateau, saddle between two ridges, those kind of dips, if you want to call them that, in the topography, I like those a lot. Man, have I found birds there, especially if it's a little bit too windy for birds. They don't like wind any more than you do, your dog does, or any other wild bird. They can't hear predators, so they're a little bit more skittish. So they'll go to those spots. Boy, and if we had a good time in some of those, those house sides boulders in a little bowl, they'll hang against those boulders on the warm side where it's been catching the sun. If you come around the other side and you're not ready, woohoo, you better be shooting that 28 gauge so you can whip it up really fast. Worked for me. Once in a while, you'll find them downhill. And I've had this more often than not. I've been hunting quail on the way up in a kind of a creek bottom in the willows and the alders that are down there, where I fully expect to see, a valley quail. They'll hang a lot in that kind of country. But once in a while, these birds go down to water every day. Every day. So, of course, if you're there at the right time, you might get lucky. I was pumping gas into my truck at a little wide spot in the road, the only gas station within 60 miles, I think. And the guy on the other side of the pump was saying, "Oh, how's your hunt going?" I said, "Not too good. We're not having much luck. Early this season, blah, blah." He said, "Well, if you go to that creek at 1 o'clock, you'll find birds." We were desperate. We believed him. And son of a gun, if he hadn't spoken the truth. At 1 o'clock, we were there, and we were watching the line of chukars come down the hill, hop off the bank, get right up there and take a drink, then get into the other line and walk back up the hill. We did shoot one or two out of that, but unfortunately my dog at the time, he ran into one of those bee nests in the ground, so we got out of there pretty fast after that. Once in a while, chukars will also hang in that shin-high bunch grass. My good friend Tom, who you've heard about before, seems to find them more in that stuff than most of us. But he goes to a different country than me a lot of times, and it's got more of that. The birds are always looking for some sort of protection from avian predators more than anything else. And if there's nothing else around, that'll work for them. Hey, I'm getting warmed up here. Scott Linden on the Upland Nation podcast, special bonus edition on the Great Basin. I might have to break this into two because we're not even halfway through this stuff. But for right now, hang loose. I'll come back and cover some other things in just a moment. I do want to remind you of a couple things. First off, my friend Jim Matthews, the guy who publishes the Western Birds newsletter. Well, number one, subscribe to that. But also, Jim tells me he's doing a series of seminars on wild bird public land hunting information for southern and eastern California. Jim's still got a bunch to go. He's got some in July and August at Mike Rahog's Shooting Enterprises down there in, where is that? Down by Corona, I think. And at the Bass Pro Shop in Rancho Cucamonga, among other places. Jim promises to put X's on the map for you. And I promise that if you go, you could win a pointer shotgun. If you want more information on all of that, you have to talk to Jim by email, odwriter@verizon.net. That's odwriter@verizon.net. And then one more quick reminder. Wing Shooting USA starts July 1st on 5 or 6 different networks. I guess I better figure that out. A whole bunch of networks. Broadcast TV in your local area. Streaming. Every smart TV in the universe We'll carry it on at least one or two of the networks. Learn more by going to findbirdhuntingspots.com. Poke around, find the Wing Shooting USA tab, and it will have a complete list of all the networks we're on and what we're doing. Like I said, this week, Wyoming pheasants. Beautiful setting, incredible dog work, and hey, the shooting wasn't bad either. Welcome back to our special bonus edition of the Upland Nation podcast, where we're talking about the Great Basin in, well, what would I call it? In Oregon, Washington, California, Nevada, Idaho. Yeah, I think that covers it. That basin is bigger than most states in the United States, and it is ringed by mountain ranges. If you look at a satellite image, it's that big flat spot in the middle. Some of the major features, the Snake River Plain in Idaho. Death Valley is the bottom end of it. Great Salt Lake to the east. Like I said, the Sierra Nevada and the Cascade Mountains on the west. But the fun part about this Great Basin is there are dozens and dozens of little mountain ranges within it. There's even a magazine called Basin and Range. And those little mountain ranges are where a lot of the chukar hunting takes place. You can base in a whole bunch of different towns that will get you close to it. So if you don't want to camp out in the middle of nowhere, take a look at some of these towns as a starting point. Elko, Nevada. Nampa, Idaho. Burns, Oregon, Susanville, California, even Reno, Nevada, Yakima, Washington, East Wendover, Utah, and Barstow, California. All worth putting a pin in the map. From a lot of those areas, all you have to do is find those big yellow blots on a paper topo map. That's U.S. Bureau of Land Management property, and a good place to start your quest. As I said before, look at the big rivers, their tributaries, and the slopes going down to them for another good vector. How about a few tips and tactics before we run out of time? They're all found in all the usual places. I've talked about much of their habitat. I haven't talked much about cheatgrass. And while it's an obnoxious and noxious weed, gets stuck in your dog's eye, goes in their ear, between their toes, it's also chukars' favorite food. They'll eat the seeds when they're ripe and they fall to the ground. They'll eat the green shoots as they come up in the fall once a few rains take place. And generally speaking, in the Great Basin, if you don't see cheatgrass, you're probably not going to find chukars. So learn to identify it. Up close, it's easy. From a distance, you might have to work on colors more than anything. So I'm told. I'm terrible about it because I'm a little bit colorblind. But if you're at the bottom of a slope and you can take your binoculars and look on up there and you don't find any cheatgrass, in fact, if you don't find a lot of cheatgrass, it's probably not worth the climb. Now, where else have I found them? Yeah, in the juniper trees. Not very often, and I probably wouldn't hunt it as a rule except when they got pushed in there. And that's happened before as well. Deep snow, once in a while. We were working up it was a terrible late season hunt. We were working up a hill when, it's a steep hill when your eyes are level with the ground and you see chukar tracks going up through the snow. So I started following them, and I'm so absorbed in looking at the tracks between my feet, I'm not paying attention to anything else. So I finally call and I say, "Hey, Dave, look at this. There's some chukar tracks right here at the top of this hill." And so I'm walking around the one big clump of sagebrush at the top of that hill, following these tracks around that sage, and then they vanish into the sage, and couldn't even get my gun mounted. That's how fast they got out of there. Yes, and they do, for the most part. And if they had no choice there, we were at the very tip top of that hill. They do fly downhill virtually all the time. So if you are careful about your approach, then that will help you a lot. Even if one of you is up high, if the other one of you can get a little bit down the hill, somebody might get a real shot. Same for the quail. They could be in any number of places. Like I said, most of the time, never at the very top, unless it's a small hill. But I remember walking up a rocky, snow-covered cinder cone, a pointy miniature volcano. And there's my dog on point looking at the slope. So I swing around, and it's not a slope. There's a big black hole there. It's, 4 foot across, a couple feet high. He's pointing a little cave. By the time I got there, they started coming out. Valley quail, onesies, twosies, and then a big wave. Poor guy. He had to kind of duck to get out from getting hit. And then we chased those quail the rest of the way down the hill. Yeah. All right. So I've talked about vertical terrain. I've talked about cheatgrass. Talked about them running uphill and flying downhill. One bit of advice, if you find chukars at a certain elevation, that's probably where the rest of them will be for a while. They're all moving up or down about the same time. Time your hunts accordingly. And during the early parts of the season, before a lot of fall rains come, the only water you can find is the only water they can find, and they will come to it. So if you can hunt away from water or towards water, you might hedge your bets. All right, so if you're out there and you're just about burnt, your thighs are just screaming, and your hunting buddy is counting the minutes to the opening of the cooler, head down to valley quail country at the bottom and look for streamside brush, the sage-covered desert nearby. These birds love waist to head high brush, but with a clear understory. They love to run. They're always moving. I watch them. We have some out in our back. They're seldom standing still. Even when they're eating, they're seldom motionless. Their escape strategy is to run, then fly. So again, that clear understory is ideal. They will do that more than anything else. Once the covey's busted, the singles will hold motionless for most good pointing dogs. But be careful, because valley quail will only fly as high as they have to. That way the Cooper's hawks won't have a good shot at them. So if you're in waist-high sage, they're going to fly away from you at waist-high plus 3 inches. Make sure you know where everybody and your dog are before you pull the trigger. Yeah, you want to be prepared if you're going this way. Love to see you out there. You know what my truck looks like. Stop by and say hello. The coffee's always on. You want to vaccinate your dog against rattlesnake bite. You want to bring more water than you think. If I had a nickel for every early career chukar hunt that was basically aborted because we ran out of water at the top of the hill. Anyway, bring lots of water and some sort of a first aid kit for your dog, if nothing else. Carry it with you in your vest. Condition your dog well. Get in shape yourself. Bring a GPS plus a map and a compass. If you have a personal locator device like a Garmin InReach or a spot locator, even better. And pack an extra spare tire for your truck. Hunt with a partner, and remember there is no sheriff's deputy or search and rescue team in the darkest corner of the lower 48 states. You're on your own, my friends, but that's the joy of it. With civilization just a wide spot in the road, you better be self-contained. Again, it's one step closer to heaven when you get up to the top of that Chukar Hill. And for most of us, that's about as near as we'll ever get. I hope you learned something about the Great Basin. I'm Scott Linden. See you on the regular broadcast very soon. Thanks for listening to this special bonus edition of the Upland Nation podcast.